Hey guys, so today's YouTube video is going to be a bit of a remake of yesterday's YouTube video where I spoke about why I like to believe in the idea of reincarnation or why it's interesting. And this one, I think I more appropriately named it Reincarnation as a Game. I might just do a whole bunch of game series, guys. And this one is inspired by Jordan Peterson, who in a debate with Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson is a clinical psychologist. Look him up. I'm not going to go into his whole bio. He has a great book, Maps of Meaning, and another one that is 12 Steps for Life. And Jordan Peterson said this thing because he's done a bunch of Bible series in which he reinterprets key Bible passages or ones of interest to him. He analyzes them with a psychoanalytical lens, and he thinks that is less dangerous than believing them as dogma. Which, guys, I like to speak poetically, because when you speak politically, that causes factions. Okay. And so I like psychoanalytical jargon because, in essence, it is quite poetic because it dissects the psyche, guys. It dissects the psyche, and the psyche is so complex. It is something that we can only really approach to a certain extent scientifically, to a certain extent poetically. Some of the coolest writers, I like James Hillman, Carl Jung. They took, everything had soul. Writing on the psyche had soul. In any case, Jordan Peterson, he makes this statement in this debate where he says, I don't postulate that I know there is a God, but I like to act as if there is one. I don't necessarily believe there is a God, but I choose to act as if there is one, because in the end, that is really the only thing we can be certain of, because there's always going to be a counter argument to everything we think. And I'm going to go into the counter arguments of reincarnation today. And I'm also going to go into that aspect of, like, what if you believed in reincarnation as a game? What does that do to you? What does that do to your perspective? What does that do to your behavior? What does that do to your state of being? I like to imagine our state of being, our foundation for who we are is at the base of it is the sediments of beliefs that have solidified the superstructure above it. And this is a Freudian concept of the foundation and the superstructure. Should I go into it a bit? I'll go into it a bit, so this will help. Guys, just collect these all in a net. Collect these all in a net. So Freud believed in three components to the psyche. The id. The id is simply what all our nerves and hormones make you want to do. Animals live mostly by their id. They're in this kind of process where they're in tune with nature and everything that nature makes them want to do, and their DNA just wanting to survive and have shelter and pass on the genes. So the id is our animal drives. The ego is what happens when you realize, to fulfill some of those id drives, like to procreate, it depends on other people who might have their own ideas of things and who are their own independent factors. So the ego is this thing that learns you to then go, okay, well, how do I interact with their reality enough to get what I want from them? And then the superego is when we live in big enough numbers. Here's the theory as far as I understand it. Please feel free to correct me, guys. The superego is when you realize if you want to, you live better in a society, and in a society there's ethics and there's moral codes that you need to adhere to. And so the superego is on top of that going, no, ego, you can't just do and say whatever you want to try and get what you want to fulfill your id drives. We kind of got to fit in here. We got to fit in. So we got to start believing some of these things so that we can correlate to these other people, whatever it might be. Black Lives Matter. Jesus will come again, so we have to live for Judgment Day. Gender is a construct. One I like to throw around just as an example is if certain Muslims believe that homosexuals will burn in hell. So, like, in their processing system of what traces as an important thing to figure out with the information you're getting. So like you see some gay people kissing and you kind of feel aroused somewhere inside, you go, no, because then I'll burn in hell. And that becomes like a law of physics to that person, and so that kind of models it, like sits on top of his id urges, which might have been he kind of was aroused. And the superego goes, ooh, and so the superego is also a locale for, if it was a person, it would be, I don't know, like Superman crossed with the Joker, like this insane justice holder that's fighting all its urges. This is a bit of a megalomaniac character. So I think that does help. So going back to Jordan Peterson's idea of like, I choose to live as if there is a God that exists, which is almost safer than believing in one, because you believe in one, it becomes like hardened. Alan Watts has this phrase he uses a lot. Guys, take me sincerely, but don't take me seriously. Like, I'm sincere, but I'm not serious about anything I say. I sincerely believe it, or I sincerely enjoy playing with this idea, but at all costs, don't take it seriously. So guys, live poetically to a certain extent. Live poetically, live with others, but live poetically. And even if you hold a political idea, give it a bit of poetic license so that you don't become a Nazi. That's a metaphor, guys. I don't mean like a real Nazi. I just mean someone who holds too tightly to certain views and doesn't allow, the elasticity of life into them. There's always a counter argument. So anyway, in today's YouTube video, I want to play with the idea of reincarnation. What would it mean if I lived? Oh, well, before I do this, Jordan Peterson's argument with I like to live as if there is a God. The reasons for that is it gives people purpose. Sometimes, like you never feel alone. You're here for some higher cause. It instills an unnatural, but maybe also a natural sense, as if you're going to live as if one is there, as if a God exists, of altruism, of sympathy, of empathy, of generosity, of living for more than yourself. And I believe that you don't need the idea of a God, but if we just think of what it would mean to believe in reincarnation and what would be the most intelligent ways, like if you were an old soul, for example, what would be the innate wisdom of understanding that you're going to live, that you've lived 100,000 lifetimes or whatever. But I'm gonna start with a bit of nuance. So reincarnation, I want to look at it first, and I've taken some notes, guys. So I'm going to refer to my notes because this is what I wish I'd done yesterday. Some people interpret it just on an energetic level, and this is something Jordan Peterson does as well. He thinks of certain notions in the Bible that kind of freakishly mutated into atrocities, such as the notion of sacrifice, that for God you must be willing to sacrifice. And this had led to, and not just in Christianity, but in, I think most strongly of, say, like South American indigenous cultures' beliefs, the Aztecs, the Incas, they had massive practices of sacrifice because they thought that would keep the weather favorable, that would keep the sun rising, the sun gods happy, or whatever it was. And then he boils it down to like, yeah, there was something in our psyche that wanted us to, that came with this word sacrifice, and that it was essential for us to tangle with it and grasp with it. And I think today we can agree that just for the sake of certain successes, it's best. Sometimes you got to learn to sacrifice something that might be pleasurable. Somebody told me recently, the body seeks out pleasure. This is my hypnotist coach, Nathan Simon's amazing guy. The body seeks out pleasure whilst the mind wants to explore. The mind seeks out tension. And therein is a great analogy for everything that is. Those are the two contrasting forces in us, the friction out of which all of our behavior and all that we can perceive, conceive comes out of. Before we go into that tangent, let's bring it back to at least finishing this little aside on sacrifice. And Jordan Peterson decided, well, what we learned today is, sacrificing a bit of pleasure for long-term gratification is usually the source to greater joy and a greater foothold in society and higher senses of fulfillment, greater contributions, which seem to reward the body more deeply. Also changes your circumstances around you more deeply a lot of the time. And so I'm going to go into reincarnation in this sense on, let's say, the most grounded level. So pulling it back, sacrifice, how it went and mutated freakishly, something in our psyche wanted to play religiously with the idea of sacrifice. And then he's bringing it back to psychoanalytical point of view. I'm going to bring reincarnation and make an argument for a scientific point of view. Maybe it's not literally the truth. Maybe there's something in our psyche, and maybe it's both. Maybe it's neither. Maybe its essence is poetic. It's a movement. And our tiny brains that dissect things into words cannot hold it all as an idea and explain it in itself, because maybe we are the projector for it. And so, in essence, we live it and we play it in our bodies, and our mind's only a part of the projection. But that's, again, a whole nother YouTube video. Hope you guys are enjoying these gems. Use them as isolated quotes. I don't mind, please. But or write them back to me so I can put them on my Twitter page. This would be very helpful. So, reincarnation on an energetic level, as I like to call it. So we all learn in physics in high school, or those of us who've done it, that energy is never destroyed. It just changes form. And so maybe in a sense, when consciousness or the light of life flickers to a stillness in a vessel of life, maybe that source of consciousness, because I think we can all agree that life, at least in our experience of it, is marked by consciousness. Boom, we're alive, we're conscious. So maybe consciousness is an energy. I don't know. And maybe when you die, it's not that it like flits and jumps out of your head as a soul and goes into another body, but maybe it just kind of, I wrote some words down, reshuffles, is redistributed, kind of dissipates into the quantum realm, the subatomic realm. Its soul is then carried in the charges, the things that then nourish maybe other forms of consciousness. Maybe consciousness in itself is an energy field. Then you can start to think of the universe as God in that sense. If consciousness is in the energy around us, then the energy around us is conscious. And this is a scientifically explored notion. And guys, for a great read on anything that's about consciousness, it's a short read. It's an easy read. It's a beautiful book. It's called Conscious, A Brief Guide to the Fundamental Mystery of Mind. It's by let me make sure I get her name right. Annika Harris. She is a yoga instructor, meditation coach, and also the wife of Sam Harris. And yes, it's a beautiful read on connecting and kind of expanding on a lot of the more popular beliefs, questions, inquisitions into the idea of consciousness. So I highly recommend it, especially if you want like a beginner's guide to these questions. And so maybe the soul just dissipates and becomes part of everything else, which, according to spiritual ideology, it was a part of everything else anyway, but just this time without concentration in the body. So maybe fragments of who you are then inform everything else around you, except for yourself at that point. So maybe reincarnation happens in that sense. And so let me look at my notes. So the soul is believed to be held in our magnetic field. But again, also, guys, we're kind of the source. We're the result of. There's a statistic that there's as many microorganisms living inside of us than there is of our own cells that make our bodies. So where do we begin and where do we end? Even in just if you look at our own flesh and blood, our like microbiome, the influence of everything in us. Is that deciding who we are in the first place? Are we really just a dissolvable, meltable statue molded in the wax of life and all its littler entities? And this is kind of explored in the book of Annika Harris through the idea of pan consciousness. That maybe what we are the result of is the merger of the consciousness of all the cells that make us up. And it goes into this fluid motion. If you think the man who enters the river is never the same man who enters the river a second time, because our cells will have died and rejuvenated, and our atomic energy will have it's not the same. Atoms will be in exchange with our surroundings. Guys, yes, please meditate on that. Let that soak in for a bit. That is science. That is the most clear science. I like to believe that I have a lot of these friends who, when I talk about my spiritual stuff, they say, I don't believe that stuff. I believe in science. And I'm like, what are you actually saying? What are you actually saying? Do you know how atoms work? Do you know how molecules work? Do you know how cells work? Yeah, you'd be a lot more dubious if you did believe in science. So maybe you got to stop using that phrase away to say, I don't want to think about this any further, because that's anti the scientific model. I'm afraid, my friend. Think about it. Spirituality might be what you're looking for. It's easily more condensed and kind of summed up in great stories. Summative words like love and oneness. I think that's how you're using the word science. In essence, you're using it not to think. But again, guys, life is poetry. So I'm all for it. Just make sure you clearly define science. But that's not very poetic. That's political of you, Pierre. I'm a fucking hypocrite. Dedicated space cadet. Got to be everything the universe wants me to be. What can I say? Anyway, let's not lose the thread here. So, to further dissect this notion of reincarnation, maybe in a grounded sense, let's look at from what my knowledge is mostly a summation of all my spiritual friends and teachers' own education on what reincarnation is, along with the few films and snippets of videos. I've not read the Tibetan Book of the Dead or things like this. I've learned here and there, especially through Alan Watts and some of the spiritual teachers that I've had, what are the notions of reincarnation. So reincarnation in a spiritual sense, it's very popular in the Buddhist religion. So in this sense, we are destined to reincarnate. Our soul will come back in another living being, and the complexity of that being will be ascending or descending depending on how we lived our previous life. Someone once told me that's kind of the meaning behind the movie Cloud Atlas. So if you lived a horrible life, you'll be more of a monstrous person, or I like to think you might come back as a dog, a rat, I don't know, something vicious, a wolf, something with more trying circumstances for life. If you want to think about it, animal kingdom is ruthless, guys. It's brutal. And if you lived a more altruistic life, you undid your karma, you followed the principles of Buddhism, and the principles of Buddhism are to kind of aid you along what they call the middle way, so that because so in a lifetime, to no longer reincarnate, that's the goal in Buddhism, or that's the aim, or that's one of the perceived outcomes that you can go for to eliminate suffering. So the idea is to eliminate suffering, you discover enlightenment in this life, and enlightenment stops the wheel of reincarnation. So that'll be the last life you acquire. In a spiritual sense, you come here with the soul contract. In Buddhism, they call that karma. So you come here with the soul contract that if you don't fulfill in this lifetime, you will fulfill in the next. You will reincarnate into a next lifetime in another setting for the play of your life. To quote Shakespeare, life is but a play and we are but actors in it. That's not a perfect quote, but he says something like that. So on the spiritual level, soul contract, on the Buddhist level, you have karma to alleviate, to work through in this lifetime. You can work it through, and then according to the spiritualists, you can regress from enlightenment, or in the Buddhist sense of karma, you can accumulate more karma, then prolonging your contract into life and putting you on the track to need to reincarnate. And in the Buddhist practices, so that you practice non-attachment and every other form of the religion and their meditative practices, and it's constantly being updated to kind of fit our socioeconomic scheme of where we are. Hopefully you leave this life an enlightened being like Buddha or Jesus, and then you don't reincarnate. And according to my spiritual friends, then this becomes like I don't know, an innate essence in the sight in consciousness, an energy and consciousness that we can all tap into. And I think of it as, maybe that means you left a legacy with the word enlightenment attached to your character, and religions were built around it. And so that in itself creates a pocket of space, tons of narratives, food for thought, philosophies that will come across, that you'll most likely come across in some form or another, that will have influenced a lot of thought lines in some form or another in your lifetime. And so Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness is going to be there, because that's going to be a dude whose legacy you're going to have to kind of unravel. What does it mean? There's religions built around it. There's philosophy built around it. There's body practices built around it. There's rituals built around it. Holy Christ, this guy this person has decidedly taken up a certain chunk of consciousness. No matter who's born into this life, they can just encounter these lineages of thought. So maybe that's what it means. I don't know. But let's keep moving on. So here I'm already starting to bridge the idea of the spiritual and what the physical might be. But I'm going to go to an evolutionary sense because that's what I like to do. Let's think about, you really acquired lots of karma. You reincarnate as something with harsher life lessons. What if you think of, I think I mentioned this on other podcasts, maybe the trauma on other YouTubes, maybe the trauma one. If you think of the fact that humans are the end result of the evolution of energy since the Big Bang into complexifying life forms on the planet Earth, I'll repeat that. If you think of evolution as the process of the complexifying nature of energy into the life forms at the present moment on the planet Earth, because if there's life forms on other planets, they have another lineage of evolution, then we can see clearly, in a sense, that we've evolved from a highly predator-prey based set of life forms. Well, first bacteria and stuff, so just kind of very basic, the lava lamp of life and what it will create. And then to life forms a bit more developed in their predator-prey relationships, until us who have language and thought institutions which seem to be leading us to aspire to harmony on a bigger and bigger scale. There's a book by Steven Pinker in which he elucidates how, if you look at history of man on a really large time scale, thousands of years, then you notice that if you're measuring it according to factors of birth rate, child mortality, and death by the hands of another human being, those statistics have constantly been going down, constantly since the beginning of man on any significant time scale. So we're kind of evolving. And I like to think of the idea of Carl Jung, who's the father of psychoanalysis, and I'll use this example a lot, who's someone who lived according to the voices in his head to see what they were guiding him to, and came up with his theories for psychoanalysis, which have helped us delineate terms such as ego and self, branches with Jung, narcissism, archetypes, things, just kind of ideas, phrases, tools, thought tools that kind of allow us to condition ourselves slowly and constantly away from a collectively accepted and more safe feeling idea of what we're part of and what we want from ourselves, what like our soul, our deepest essence, our spirit wants from ourselves. And I think this is why religions have been a fundamental part of human evolution. Psychoanalysis is part of the evolution of meta-narrative, of religious thinking, of ideological thinking. And he was saying it to himself, when he untangled the voices in himself. So I like to see that it's kind of our DNA yelling to we've got some evolving to do. These crazy things that we've eventually come to create, they do words. That was a good tool. Let's put all these voices in his head. Let's get him to listen. This one will listen. This one's important. This one will listen. Write it down, dude. Write it down. Create a mystic around it. Become famous. We're gonna have a subconscious conversation with everything around you. This also has DNA that's human. So this can become an institute. He's doing it. He's doing it. Yes. And maybe on this deep mycelial level, DNA really is God, because they are, it is one. It knows. It is. I'm stealing this quote from a Duncan Trussell Family Hour episode with Connor Habib. Guys, amazing podcasts. Duncan Trussell Family Hour, especially the episodes with Connor Habib, where he asks Connor Habib, what is DNA? And comes up with the funny conclusion. Duncan comes up with the funny conclusion in the end. The DNA is the rainbow road between Logard and Asgard, or Highgard and Asgard. You guys will know better which ones are the right ones. So it's kind of the ushering from material to the divine and the gods. So maybe our DNA is the gods, or it's the undifferentiated realm. Anyway, let me not lose the track that I had. It was a good one. I hope so. I'm not seeing myself, but you can let me know. You can say it's shit in the comments underneath if it's not a good one. What the fuck are you saying? Dedicated Space Kid. We lost you ages ago, Healer Hawley, whatever the hell you call yourself. You fucking schizophrenic dumbass with two alter egos. Because when you swear, you need an excuse for it, even though you claim to be a spiritual dude. That's why I link it back to what's here, man. The science, or some kind of pseudo-mystic, poetic garbage riffraff that should be taken sincerely and not seriously. Covered all the angles already, okay? So just keep listening. So Jung, and what if our DNA is pulling the strings constantly, but we have free will, so we don't have to listen. Just trying to pull the strings, trying to have this feedback loop. Life informing DNA, DNA informing life, humans informing gods, gods informing humans. Just think about the pocket. Like I said, the religious was a fundamental sphere of drawing us in a certain direction, so we can model our behavior away from these very primal predator-prey relationships. And if even look, DNA is the rainbow bridge. Guys, I'm going to go into epigenetics. Yes, this motherfucker's just throwing out all these big words. Asshole. Epigenetics, what is that? You lost me ages ago. That's not poetic anymore. It's not too difficult, guys. I hope this will explain it to you. Epigenetics. So, this is the idea that our genes are like a computer program or like a piano. So our body's made of proteins. Our genes have the computer code, the program code to create those proteins. This is all very summed up quickly and conveniently. So when scientists were figuring stuff out, they had technology to kind of trace our genome, what they hoped, what they expected to find is that we'd have as many genes as there are proteins in the body. What they did find is there's like 100 times more proteins that the body makes than there is different genes. So how if there's not a gene per protein, how are they doing this? It's the combination, it's the sequences, it's the ones and zeros, guys, except for in DNA it's like A, B's, D's, and it's letters. But so I think if your DNA, you're looking at life in terms of you are the rainbow bridge sprouting out proteins from codes that are informed by what's outside of you anyway. Asgard, God, the bridge from the gods to Logard. I keep thinking Asgard should be where we are, like the ass. Crown to the butt. Somebody just reappropriate those terms. I mean, am I offending anyone? The Norwegian people? The Scandinavians? And we're allowed to offend them, right? They're like white utopia and they got to atone for their white guilt, right? Like, they're not allowed to get offended. I'm kind of brown. I'm part Arab. Oh, that's really contentious. I'm not going to go there. I'm also part French and English. Guys, peace, and all those jokes I just made. Let's get back to the information, guys, or at least whatever this is, the poetry, the weird psychotic guided meditation. Okay. So, DNA. We don't know what they are. They're like little portals to influences of time and space around us because they're codes that little things called RNAs and everything that we've evolved to be kind of turn into protein, which then forms life forms on the planet, which can then complexify and just shape, like humans especially. Look at Dubai, shape the land around us. Yeah, Dubai. And back to Jung. I'll keep you guys in the loop. Back to Jung, he formed a new religion, psychoanalysis. It's not really a religion. I'm using that term poetically. I've already traced why it's appropriate in this tirade. And he listened to those voices inside him, which might be the little DNAs going, we have conscious thought. We've evolved to have creatures with conscious thought. Let's try and communicate with them. Let's try and communicate with them consciously. So we're expanding consciously. And the codings for those proteins, it's a few genes and lots of proteins. In fact, some kind of tend towards the idea that the combination of proteins, peptides, these things that they can give us all kinds of impressions. So it's kind of like the Matrix, guys. I think if we were DNAs, you'd see everything as filing ones and zeros and the effects of like those ones and zeros solidify into what seems like the Matrix, but Neo can see through it because he's understood. He's connected Asgard and Logard, Highgard and Asgard. He is the Rainbow Bridge. He's accepted his role as the Rainbow Bridge. So he can bend the simulator. Anyway. So what if there's a feedback loop? And what if reincarnation is just the sending of information across DNAs, and maybe reincarnation happens as long as our DNAs survive? But I like the spiritual idea. I like when I talk about reincarnation as a game that we'll choose to live by. I like the spiritual idea that we're souls with a soul contract coming back to this planet to finish out some kind of soul contract. And I'll tell you why I like that. Because that means, and I just did a podcast on the chakras, and I'm going to go to the root chakra. That means our soul is living a geological time. It's living at slower than geological time. It's living at universal time. Time is a joke to our soul. So our soul will go through all these movements, come back and play. It can play for 1,000,000 years. Oh, fuck this. I'm just going to slosh about and do whatever I want. I'm just going to come back anyway. And then it masters play. And goes, oh, play's more fun when I have a more complex chessboard to play with. And this is where the idea of reincarnation gets interesting for me if we were to live by it. We're moving towards virtual reality, guys. We're moving towards defeating aging with nanobots, mastering parallel universes with quantum theory, just in spiritual practices, healing practices make you feel blissed out. Plant medicines is communing with the wisdom of the planet. Psychology, modern medicine, body therapy, singing, resonance, sports, athletes keep breaking our ideas of what is humanly possible in merger with technology. Like, if we are playing for the long run, for the delayed gratification, because our soul's going to come back and come back and come back and come back and come back, and the guys to complete this soul contract, it's okay. The soul contract can stay there. Imagine we're all in agreement that we reincarnate. Imagine we're all in agreement that we reincarnate. Imagine how much stillness you would breathe into every moment. Imagine you met you saw your neighbor, and you're both like, yeah, you too, huh? Whoa. Why do we keep forgetting? What does it all mean? Look at where we are now. Instant fascination. What moment in time and space has the universe spat us out? Where did we choose? Why did we choose this? Oh, I'm going to listen intently. And when we're listening intently, guys, that is power. That is power, because if you go into my explanation of existential angst, of knowing that most of our agitations in life is this recognition of this like subconscious, this unconscious knowing of how minutely small we are in the face of space and time. So we slowly play games into like, well, I can control this, well, I affect that, so I'm at least this important. And it's from like childhood to adulthood. And then when you're an adult, if you're not hoping to play games that then offer for many others that you don't trust in a collective, and something's traumatized you, let's be honest, and even trauma becomes a game of like, well, let's all take care of each other, because to get everyone to be truly compassionate with everyone, we kind of got to hold each other up, despite all the isms and people feel oppressed by other sections of people. The funny thing is, the way through that is kind of very similar for each of us, and it's on an individual level, and we all individually want to be validated. And if we could play a game in which we're all individually validated, then we could have just a bit more patience with each other. And I think reincarnation is one of those games that takes the onus off of anything that seems to be happening now, except for like a simulation to kind of play out some soul contract. It's like I'm Bill Gates. I'm one of the richest men in the world, and CEO, and I thought I had all these human needs, but then on a soul level, this is just the right person to be playing out, I don't know, some step in evolution. I like to think of the soul contracts as like issued from a universe. Like a universe is like, you are all just the micropixels of a universe contract. I'm doing this movement with all the soul contracts I've issued. This is my body of life, my work, my body of work. In that sense, it kind of connects the like reincarnation to us being one, and the idea that maybe reincarnation is just the fact that energy never is destroyed; it just changes shape and form. So, guys, I'm getting a bit wide for even my own web to hold all this stuff. So we're just expanding outwards here. We're surfing the wave. Surfing's important, guys. Just breathe that in, and then like eventually this idea just does what it did for me just now. It takes you back to just feeling. Because that's where the real vulnerability starts. What if death is not the end? Then really what we have is each other. Through lifetimes, really what we have is ourselves. But if we're playing for the long-term gratification, then we're making a world in which it's easy to be ourselves. Or we're living as this being that's, godlike, but we have as many goes as possible to get that right. So we're godlike anyway. I just like how in this time, at least for me, it can be a notion to feel present with everything that is. And to not be in a rush. Not be in a rush in this lifetime. And to go, oh, I don't know what the next one might be. No matter how hard I think things could be right now, what is actually amazing? Or how could this be amazing for everyone if we just slowed down for a second? What do we achieve? What can we share? What can we pull? What can we offer? And this is why I like the idea of playing with. In any case, it's a tough one. It's a challenging one. Even here, I'm going through existential angst as I explore it. I apologize to those to whom I'm also offering that. But it's that or it all ends. In any case, part of it will be childhood. Inner child. Maybe that's why that's so important. Because if we're not having an essence to life that is childlike, then we're a bit too serious and not sincere enough. So guys, I think I've gone pretty deep on this one. I might keep digging. I might just keep doing other ones like this. Reincarnation as a starting point and seeing where we go. But I'm freaking myself out. So reach out, ask for a hug someone else. Tell them you watch this. Watch it with them like it's a horror film. I don't know. Do something. But let's face this together, guys. And let's follow psychoanalysis, because I think Jung came up with that's a very strong shout for a way of living, as well as ancient cultures, ancient wisdoms. But it's 2021. Let's coalesce. Let's consolidate around the thing that's easiest that's grounding to believe. And let's remember to enjoy ourselves. So Healer Hawley, dedicated space cadet, this asshole right here. Hope you enjoyed this. Like, subscribe, comment, dislike. Any publicity is good publicity. And have a beautiful, beautiful day, evening, week, meditation, next inhale. Feeling in your fingers, hands, whatever it is. Meal, Netflix binge. Enjoy the shit out of that. Because that's part of this life. Damn, we're lucky. And say thank you for everyone else who's here making you lucky. Okay, guys. Love and light, love and life. Peace out.